Let's visit the 90s all over again. Put on those hammer pants. This is Dope Nostalgia.
Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 175 of Dope Nostalgia Podcast. And I'm your host, Naomi, as always. My special guest today has been on the show before. We did the Brand Van 3000 episode together. His name is Justin Lamb, and he also is a podcast host and musician. You can check out his show called Friend Request Podcast. Just give him a Google and check out his website, justinlambmusic.com. He's here to talk to me today about a band that I didn't really know that much about, but I know he was so passionate about them. And I was like, teach me, tell me all about Less Than Jake. And he does a great job doing that. So here's a little bit of background information on the band Less Than Jake.
Wikipedia moment.
Please bear in mind that Wikipedia is not to be taken as actual 100% fact. Any donkey could edit it at any time. If I'm reading you the artist's bio, that stuff is real truth.
We're going to the wiki for this one. Less Than Jake is an American ska punk band from Gainesville, Florida, formed in 1992. The band consists of Chris Demakis, Roger Lima, Matt Yonker, Buddy Schwab, and Peter J.R. Wasilowski. The group released its debut album, Pezcore, in 1995, following a series of independent 7-inch single releases. The band's subsequent 2 studio albums, Losing Streak and Hello Rockview, were released on major label Capitol Records, leading to increased exposure. Borders and Boundaries was released in 2000 on Fat Wreck Chords. The band's 5th studio album, Anthem, in 2003, was the group's most commercially successful to date, featuring the singles She's Gonna Break Soon and this one, The Science of Selling Yourself Short. In 2008, the band founded its own label, Sleep It Off Records, and released its 7th full-length album, GNVFLA. The band has recently stated its preference for EP releases and independently issued Greetings from Less Than Jake in 2011, and its counterpart, Season's Greetings from Less Than Jake, in 2012. The band combined the two to create the compilation album Greetings and Salutations. The band's 8th studio album, See the Light, was released on November 12, 2013. The band entered the studio in 2016 to record their latest EP titled Sound the Alarm, which was released in 2017 through Pure Noise Records. Now, their 9th studio album, Silver Linings, was released on December 11th, 2020. It's time to bring on the actual expert in Less Than Jake, the big fan. It's Justin Lamb from Friend Request Podcast. Welcome, Justin, back to the show.
Did you see the picture I emailed you?
Yes, I just saw it like 20 minutes ago, and I'm like, perfect. I love this brainstorm web.
The web of less, it's insane. And like, there was a lot of it that I knew, but then I learned a few new things.
That's awesome. See, you're really going to be in the lead on this one too, because I just learned about this band from you asking me if let's do this episode.
Oh.
I didn't know. And so yesterday I listened to a bunch of their songs in the car driving around, and I was like, okay, this reminds me of Mighty Mighty Boss Tones.
I can see that.
That's the only one I could think of as a comparison, but I was like, okay, this helps me kind of define what ska really is, because I always think of ska as like reggae flavored punk.
So, okay.
Correct me. You educate me.
Are we diving in?
Sure.
Yeah, well then let's start with the basics. This will be like teaching a class.
Okay.
So yeah, ska, there's 3 waves of ska that are acknowledged. It's actually, I don't remember what it's called now. It might just be called Pick It Up, because that's like a common phrase you hear in ska bands. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. And I think there's a documentary called Pick It Up that's about ska and like its rise and subsequent fall, some would say, in the 90s. But there's 3 waves. The first is like more the bass reggae stuff.
Mhm.
The second came out of Europe and was more like anti-establishment, classic, also called two-tone ska, with like the Specials, and a lot of bands that you see, like the checkered and the suit, like where you get like Rude Boys from, where they got the nice like three-piece suits and stuff like that. And then third wave ska is what we're going to talk about today,
Okay.
which came around in the early mid 90s, with bands such as Less Than Jake, Real Big Fish, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Bruce Lee Band, MU330, Five Iron Frenzy, like all the it's like ska with this added little like punk kick. Some
Okay.
bands lean harder into the punk era than others, but it definitely it still maintains the roots of having the horns and the upstroke guitars, but then you add in some distortion and pick up the tempo a little bit more. And that's where you get your third wave ska. And some of those bands, I mean, Less Than Jake is a perfect example, have just continued onward.
Mhm.
And, you know, and then there's plenty that you will never hear about ever again. And so,
Really? Yeah. I mean, is it appropriate to mention the huge name, the huge one that kind of became a huge charter, and that was No Doubt?
so yeah, I mean, that's worth mentioning, especially the early years. I don't know the name of the account, and anyone listening that's seen this will know what I'm talking about, but there's a guy on TikTok who the video will always start with like this guy in this time, and he'll start telling this history, and somewhere about in the like 3/4 part, like almost towards the end, you'll start to piece together like who he's talking about. And there was one about No Doubt, or maybe just Gwen Stefani, but I'm pretty sure it was about No Doubt. And I didn't know it was at first, and I thought I knew a good amount about them. Like I knew their early ska days and everything, but the intertwinings of the bands that they worked with and that were each members were different parts of throughout that like late 80s, early 90s period before they were like No Doubt,
Mhm.
is crazy. Yeah. And they definitely, I think they helped bring that over here. If you I would argue that if you're talking about commercial success of like true third wave ska bands, I would give that to either Mighty Mighty Boss Tones or Real Big Fish.
Okay. Because
Mighty
that's
Mighty Boss
true.
Tones with Impression That I Get, and then Real Big Fish with Sellout, which is in itself funny and like a play on the entire idea. But so they got a lot of radio play.
Yeah.
You know, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones was in Clueless and then continued onward. But man, Less Than Jake.
Mhm.
So I'm so excited. I'm gonna open. I don't know
Good.
if you want to post this somewhere. I sent you the picture. I have this spider web brainstorm of Less Than Jake, and the
Yes.
people that are all intertwined and connected.
I'm going to take that photo and put it in our social media when this episode comes out so people can see the amazing web of connection that you established there. It's great.
Yeah, I love it. And I decided like I'm going to work on the facts that I have. I'm going to throw in my typical anecdotal stories. And you know, if there's some gaps that you want to fill in from Wikipedia or something, feel free. But
Let's do it.
So I will tell you, I got introduced to Less Than Jake the same time I got introduced to all the other punk and ska bands. I was like 13 or 14. I was about to go into high school. I went to my first Vans Warped Tour. It was in 1997. The last year it was actually allowed at the specific venue because people toured the crap out of the lawn and everything. But those punk rock kids.
Yeah.
That's where I learned about a bunch of bands. And back then in the punk and ska scene, you would get these compilation CDs that would have 25 bands on them, because all these punk songs, all these ska songs are like 2 minutes long, so you could fit a bunch of them on a CD. And that's how you would find out about these new punk bands. And then you would see them open for, I think every punk show I ever went to was always like 3 or 4 bands at least.
Mhm.
They would just pile them on and play these sets. And that's how I learned about Less Than Jake is through Warped Tour and the CDs that get passed around. And the first album that I had was Losing Streak, which was their first like commercial album with Capitol Records.
Mm.
And prior to that, they released an album called Pezcore, which that's a whole other rabbit hole we're going to go down with Pez. But it's all connected. And Pezcore was like, if you were the cool punk kid, you already had Pezcore when Losing Streak came out, because that was their previous album. I was the late bloomer on a lot of things. I got Hang Ups by Goldfinger, which was their second album, and everyone knew their first one. And I came to everything a little late. That's fine. I got
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
There's just more to discover.
In
That's
the 14-year-old punk rock scene, there was a lot wrong with it. I think the word poser was thrown around a lot.
Oh, that's the hipster thing though, right? Like,
Yeah.
I knew them before they were famous.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Which I suppose it's a really ironic sentiment with punk bands, because like most of them were never famous. So I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know what that means, but I think the sentiment still holds true with a lot of those people. Yeah, and then I started listening to Less Than Jake. I will say on that same note, call out my own pretentiousness. When they got Hello Rockview out in '98 and started to get radio play, to this day I still don't own that album. I know a lot of songs off it, but there was something about hearing it on my local alternative station that kind of turned me off to it, which, saying that out loud, is really a bummer. But I will say the follow-up to that, which is Borders and Boundaries, arguably the last of the '90s decade, because that came out actually I think in 2000. That album I listen to constantly. Like when Apple Music makes little favorites playlists and stuff, songs from that album are constantly on it, because I always have that playing pretty regularly in my playlist. I love that album. I don't know what it is, if it came at such a perfect transitional time and the songs are really introspective and the lyrics. It's just a really, really good album.
Wow.
Yeah. And then they continued onward. This podcast inspired me to look them up, because I've seen them many times in the last few years, and they're going to be in Detroit in July. So I bought tickets and I will be there again.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And they're still putting out music and new albums, and some stuff's better than others, but that's what happens with all music.
Mhm.
And that's my experience with Less Than Jake. I've seen them countless times. Like over the span of the last 25 years. I've seen them so many times, and when they come around, I still see them, because they just put on such an epic show.
Mhm. How much of the band would you say is still original members?
So I believe it's 3
Mhm.
total. Definitely Chris DeMakes. I don't know how to say his last name. Sorry, Chris. I've spoken to him at shows before. I still don't know how to say his last name. And he has a podcast too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he talks to other people in other bands. But he and the drummer, who's no longer in the band, Vinny Fiorello, they
Mhm.
founded the band and then quickly brought on the bass player, who also does lead vocals, Roger Lima. And so Chris and Roger are still in it, and then their trombone player, who of all the people I didn't write down, because he's still in it and he's been with them forever.
Mhm.
Those are the 3 original people that are still in it. And Vinny, the drummer, left in, I think it was 2018.
Not
but
too
he
long ago.
stayed- No, yeah, he stayed with them for a very long time. But and I'm going to branch off on him when we get there, because I'm telling you, it's all connected. It's
Okay.
crazy. Yeah, and this is, for those unfamiliar with ska, like, this is a band that has your typical band. So you got your guitar, your bass, your drums, and then there's a horn section, which really adds. I don't know if have you ever played a horn instrument?
A flute. So
Okay.
no.
I played trombone for like a hot minute, and when I was like 12, but
Yeah.
the addition of like a horn part is this whole other like symphonic element into the music. Like if you ever break down music theory wise, like the different parts, I mean, your typical guitar and bass, and a lot of ska guitar is actually pretty complicated as far as the chords that they use. But then you add in the horn parts, which are like kind of like somewhere between bass lines and lead guitar parts, played on like symphony of horns. And depending on the band, you have like 2, 3, 4 different horn players. Less Than Jake, depending on the year, I think at the most they had 3, but typically it's 2. It's trombone and a saxophone. And just those parts alone, those are the parts for me personally, like those horn parts, those are the melodies that'll get stuck in my head.
Do they in recordings does the horn parts sound like they do live, or do they in recordings double it up and do harmony or anything with trying to make it sound more full?
I think that would depend on the album.
Okay.
And I think that's really apparent. Like if you listen to Pezcore, so their original saxophonist, Jessica Mills, who for the time, like I'm probably still now, who am I kidding? It was awesome to see a chick in a punk band.
Yes.
You go to the shows and it was like all guys all the time. Five Iron Frenzy had a woman in their band at one point, and obviously Save Ferris came out with the female front. And other than that, like you didn't see a lot of women in that scene. And unfortunately, Jessica Mills left in like I think 98, not too long after their first couple albums. And she went and did. There's a band Subhumans that she played with. Citizen Fish is another band she played with. There's a third one I couldn't find any information on, but so they're connected to them through her. They're I forget what this started with. Oh, horn sections.
Yes.
On their more produced albums, I think starting with Losing Streak and going forward, yeah, I think there's definitely some layering and effects, but I would argue though their live shows, sound wise, I mean you're getting that same thing. I think they do really well duplicating that sound in a live show. And horns, just like if you mic them right, horns are loud as shit.
Yeah, that's true. Very true.
It is an instrument that you know if your neighbor is practicing, because it is very loud.
That's a tough one to take up sometimes. Like if you lived in an apartment or something. Yeah, that'd be a tough instrument to take up.
I don't know how that works. At least I see the piano behind you. I have one over here. You can throw some headphones on that at least, so you don't.
True. Or if you're a drummer, you can use an electronic kit.
Yeah. There's ways around most instruments, but not much you can do with a horn.
True.
But those 3 original members, Roger Lima, Vinnie Fiorello, and let's say Chris DeMakes, because that's the pun on his name he uses in the podcast title. So I'm assuming that's how you say it.
Yeah, I would stick with that.
We'll call it DeMakes.
DeMakes.
Yeah, those 3 also appeared. They started helping out their friend Mike Park on his record label Asian Man Records in the 90s. And all of them played in a band called the Bruce Lee Band, which has phenomenal songs and made so much sense when I finally found that out back in like the late 90s, because you'd hear these songs by them and you'd be like, God, this sounds so much like Less Than Jake, just like with a different lead singer. Like the tonality was there, but that's what it was. It really was. It was Less Than Jake with a different lead singer. And I believe Jessica Mills played a little with them when they were tour too, the original saxophonist. And I saw both Bruce Lee Band and Less Than Jake at the 1998 Ska Against Racism tour, arranged by Mike Park, the founder of Asian Man Records, and Bruce Lee Band and Skank and Pickle. All of that, it's all connected. And that tour, I got to tell you, if there is a defining, like Warped Tour, I think for that time period was really more about skateboards and punk rock. If there was like a musical tour that defined third wave ska, I would say it was the Ska Against Racism tour, because the lineup on that tour, MU330, Mustard Plug, Less Than Jake, Bruce Lee Band, Five Iron Frenzy. The sounds that came out of those bands are what that period of ska music was. And in addition to that, personal anecdotal level, that tour, and when it came to my town, like the KKK protested it. And so there was like standoffs outside the venue. And I was like this 16-year-old, like, screw you. Like, it really started a level of activism for me that I don't know if I would be as passionate about if I hadn't had experiences like that, where I actually got to see these like hateful people in person,
Mm-hmm.
standing up for something like that I believe in. So that was an important tour for me, but I think it was important for that entire genre of music, and the lineup shows that. And they just had so much fun. The funness of the shows. Can we talk about that?
Yes. Let's do that.
So I mentioned Pezcore, their first album.
Mm-hmm.
Pez, the candy, Pez candy, for those that don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know the history here. I tried looking into it, but Less Than Jake and Pez have a long history. I think at first they would throw Pez out, like the little Pez dispensers, at their shows early on. And one of the members, I think it's Roger, collects Pez dispensers, or collected dispensers. And it just became this kind of branding for them, and shows. They would throw Pez dispensers out at shows. Their album's called Pezcore. And there's a bunch of little intricacies. And then these people that are big Less Than Jake fans, there was two of them in my high school. They would in turn become like big Pez people. So I know a number of people that, like, if Less Than Jake's their favorite band, it just so happens they also had a Pez collection. And it became intertwined with the band. And in addition to throwing Pez dispensers out, their shows, they wanted it to be like a big party, and they still do their best to do this. You can still see a lot of the stuff I'm about to mention at current shows, which is crazy to think about because they've been doing this for 30 years now. Yeah, 30. I think they formed 30 years ago this year. That's crazy.
Everything is like that now.
Oh my God.
I think about that almost every day doing this show. Like, oh man.
Well, yeah, you picked a decade to really make you feel old if you start thinking about that part.
It's true.
But they have mascots, and it was customary to see anywhere from like 3 to 5 different, like, dressed up, like, outside of Hollywood Boulevard mascots, in a Mickey Mouse costume or a dinosaur costume or whatever that looks like, dancing around on stage, jumping into the crowd and doing stage dives and crowd surfing. And then I don't know when, sometime in the last 15 years, maybe 20. Oh no, you're right. I am old. Their mascot became like their little guy. I don't know. Their mascot. He's like a little kind of Bart Simpson looking guy almost, because he's a little like big head with spiky hair. And that
Is
guy
he animated or like an actual like mascot costume?
It's a mascot costume.
Okay.
He comes out on stage and he dances, or skanks, if you will, which is what the official ska dance is called.
The skank?
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay.
And then they get like, big toilet paper guns and shoot toilet paper into the audience. And they really involve the fans. And they've done that all along, and they still do it today. And I read an interview where Chris talked about like how that's kind of the fuel that keeps them going, is like they still have this fan base that's still super passionate about like meeting them and their music, and they know that, and they love that, and they just want to like give back. And so they are always throwing out toys in the audience, or dancing on stage, or shooting toilet paper, or whatever it looks like. And they're just making it into a big fun party, and their live show is spectacular to this day. And that's saying a lot, because I feel like bands typically tone it down eventually.
Well, as long as you can continue to make it a party, you should. I think it's wonderful.
Amen.
Yeah. You don't want to get old crusty and boring.
Crusty boring parties.
Maybe I'm jaded and bored, always looking for more, waiting around for the next big fix. I know I'm a wreck, I'm a mess, but I couldn't care less. Don't know what it would take to change me. Everybody's so afraid to be different. Please excuse me now if I don't get it. I think sex is overrated. Love is always getting wasted. Designer drugs and dead-end jobs and classic rock is so outdated. I'm so sick of therapy and all the things it's done to me. How can I be satisfied when everything is overrated?
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Dope Nostalgia listeners, I love you and I thank you so much for being a part of this show and its success over the last 2 years. We have what's called Patreon for those who want to support the show financially. For as little as $1 a month, you can become a subscriber and get bonus content, early podcast release, all kinds of cool behind-the-scenes stuff, and more. There's different tiers of membership starting at only $1 a month. And we even have some special merch for you guys who are in it for the long run. So please join our Patreon. It's at www.patreon.com/dope nostalgia.
Ever watch a movie so bad that it made you laugh? We have, and that's what we enjoy at End of the Reel. We're just two brothers doing a podcast about bad movies. Sometimes the movie will leave you in tears from laughter, other times pain. From classics like The Room, Troll 2, and B-Movie, bad movies are here to stay. Check us out at endofthereel.com.
When things get tough, remember, Shake and Bake makes it easy to treat your family to plump, juicy pork chops without frying. Why fry? Shake and Bake. If you've developed a fear of frying, remember, Shake and Bake makes it easy to make crisp, juicy chicken for your whole family without frying. Why fry? Shake and Bake.
Introduce some fun facts.
Wonderful.
So the drummer, I said I would come back to this. The drummer, Vinnie Fiorello, their former drummer now, I guess, he started his own record label. Still in the 90s, 96, 98, one of those two. But started his own record label, Fueled by Ramen is what the record label is called.
That's a great name.
Yeah. Started with a friend of his. While he was there, they made Jimmy Eat World's first album, which launched Jimmy Eat World, and then made more recently, and by recently I mean like 2006, I think it might have been 2005, they made Panic at the Disco's first album.
No way.
And then it was after Panic at the Disco that Vince left the record label. He didn't like the direction they were going with like music and production wise, so he left there. But after he left, they continued successfully. Paramore's first album was on that same label, as well as 21 Pilots, and then Warner Brothers, who was their like partner early on, put them and another few other indie labels all under one umbrella. But that record label that he started launched so many of those bands that are
huge.
And all that from the drummer of Less Than Jake, which is just insane to me. The amount of times that I've seen them live, and never once did I look at the drummer and go, oh, hey, is that the guy that launched Jimmy Eat World's career? Like, that's crazy.
Not likely.
Like,
I know. And the thing is, too, it's like, it's quite a strike of lightning to launch one huge successful band, but it's like you just mentioned like 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's just the bigger ones. There's a laundry list of bands, especially in the punk and ska scene that they put out there. They were right there. It's funny because I don't know. I guess in that world, I imagine there's more a sense of community than competition.
Mm.
Because I think like Borders and Boundaries, the album they put out in 2000, was put out on Fat Records. They bought out their contract from Capitol so they could put that out on Fat Records instead, which is NoFX's Fat Mike's record label.
Mm.
And I would have thought that Vinny's record label, Fueled by Ramen, would be direct competition with Fat Records at that time, because they're both, producing these like smaller bands, a lot of punk bands. But I mean, I guess it's just more about community and what kind of sound you want and who you want to work with. Like that's an area that I wish I knew more about, like the studios and the recording and how different labels help you sound different ways. But that's starting to go over my head when we start talking about that. But it's really crazy how it's all intertwined. And this is one of the few bands that I really my mind was blown at how much, like how many other bands you can draw to these band members, either through the record label or through them playing with other bands. Like they're one of their trombonists, who I don't believe is still with them, Pete Anna, he was in Slapstick before that, which is like a very foundational ska band before that. And so to have one of your members be in one of those bands, I'm like, it's no wonder that they're so good, because they pull talent from so many places. And when I think of this band, I think of like the punk side of that would be NoFX, because the members of NoFX, like you could draw that same kind of spider web with Rancid and Me First and the Gimme Gimmes and Lagwagon and Bad Religion and like all these punk bands that laid the foundation for what like then turned into kind of pop punk and stuff like that. So it's just really impressive, not only that they were able to accomplish so much stuff individually and collectively, but that they're still doing it. Like they're literally right now, as we're speaking, on a European tour.
Good.
It's crazy.
That's exciting.
It's wild.
And I mean, I wouldn't say it's rare for bands to keep going as long as they have and have that longevity and still keep playing to their fan base, but I think it's special. I think it's very special. And if you can, 3 original members is pretty good.
Yeah, and I would say, God, I almost want to say 4 because of Vinny, but because that was only 2018.
Yeah.
I mean, he was around for 25 years in the band.
Yeah.
And I if I had to speculate, I'd say I think his daughter was probably like 8 or 9 when he left the band, and that might be a reason to leave the band.
Maybe, yeah.
They tour a lot. That's the thing when I think about how often I see them come around, I gotta wonder, like, what is that life? Because I think it's just, this is what we do. And
What's
like
the family life like?
Yeah, I don't know how you maintain family and stuff like that. But I know they're like hometown heroes, man. Gainesville, Rock City, down in Florida.
So
that's where they started. Yeah, go ahead.
If you could pick a favorite track from the 3 albums that we talked about there, just from each one. I know that's a tough thing. But let's say with Pezcore, let's say Hello Rockview and Borders and Boundaries, because Losing Streak doesn't count.
Why doesn't Losing Streak count?
Because you didn't really care for it.
No, Hello Rockview is the one I didn't care about.
Sorry, I got them the other way around. My bad.
And it's funny, like I obviously know all the singles and stuff from there. Like all my best friends are metalheads and Boring Life in a Boring Town. But from the other ones, Pezcore I think is easy. Well,
it's a tough question.
I'm gonna say My Very Own Flag. It is a great track that's not super horn heavy, now that I think about it, but very punk rock.
Yeah.
The title kind of gives it away, but it's the chorus is, wish I had my own, wish I had my own, my very own flag. Like just kind of wish I had my own flag to fly. I don't fit in here. I don't agree with this, and this. And that's very like anti-establishment, punk rock foundation, and the guitar in that, like the distortion sound on that guitar just hits just right. And whoever mixed that, as shitty a quality as the head is, I forget if I can swear on here.
Oh, yeah, you can.
As shitty quality as that is, that guitar is mixed perfectly for that song. And I whenever that comes on, I definitely love that song. But that album has so many great songs.
Something that's inside of me is something that I cannot see. Like rules and regulation, passed down for generation. For generation. Wish I had my own, wish I had my own, my memory of Mary Black. Wish I had my own, wish I had my own, my memory of my own blood.
And it should be noted that between that Losing Streak and then the compilation album Losers, Kings, and Things We Don't Understand that came out the same year as Pezcore, there's at least 2 songs that are on all 3 of those albums.
Yeah.
Johnny Quest Thinks We're Sellouts and Jen Doesn't Like Me Anymore are
Oh,
on
no
all
way.
3 of those albums. But let's see, Losing Streak.
Hmm.
What is the name of I can tell you the track number. Can we talk about Losing Streak for a second? Because Losing
Of
Streak did something
course.
I've never seen before. I've never seen since. And with the digital age of music, we will never see it again.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Do you know about Losing Streak's hidden track?
No, I now have the wiki in front of me though. So I'd rather you tell me.
So Losing Streak had the album starts out with this audio clip that says, "This is the old dude, Howard J. Reynolds, and you're listening to Less Than Jake." And then it goes right into the song. Automatic. Great album. But there's a hidden track that has Howard J. Reynolds, who is just speaking, talking about it's kind of a gross story the older I get, but like having sex with this girl, and then the woman's husband comes home and he tries to hide and then tries to get out of the house before the husband can see him, but the husband ends up like taking a crap with the bathroom door open, so he can't sneak by the bathroom door, and he just has to make a run for it. And that's the story that leads up to This is the Old Dude, Howard J. Reynolds, like the intro to the album. And there's a thing inside the liner notes that said, if you find the hidden track, like write to us here, self-addressed stamped envelope, sign of the Times.
Oh,
and
man.
send you like a bone. I forget what you got. You probably got like a Pez dispenser and a sticker or something, but you got something. And the hidden track was before track 1. So when you played the album, if on a CD player, you had to hit rewind immediately, and it would go into negative count on the numbers, and you could rewind it, I think, up to like 2.5 minutes. And the track was before track 1. I don't know. I've burned a lot of CDs in my day. I've never figured out how they did that, to where the CD player recognizes like, this is track 1, this is where we start, but you can rewind.
I have never heard of anyone doing that before.
Yeah, never before, never again, never will. Like, it'll never happen now because CDs just aren't really a thing.
It says not all of the CDs had this hidden track either.
Oh, I feel so fancy now.
Mm-hmm. So if you've got it,
Oh, I got
that's
it.
awesome.
But and I'll tell you, anybody out there that is thinking about finding that CD in their old CD book and trying it out, please do. It's like, it's worth hearing. It's a funny story. And the way the guy tells it, who, I don't know the story with Howard J. Reynolds. I assume he's just like this old guy that they met at a liquor store and started hanging out with, because that's the vibe he gives off. But
Yeah.
the story he tells and the way he tells it is really funny. And it's but God, the thought and ingenuity and putting that before track one, it still blows my mind. And I still, to this day, I am baffled by how they pulled that off. And I guess I don't know as much about CD players as I thought I did, because I don't know how that would work.
See, now I'm wondering if you were to actually like copy that disc, burn it yourself, if that track would even copy because
don't
of
think it
that
would.
weirdness. Yeah. And it was a minute 45. It wasn't short.
Yeah, no, it's a whole story.
It's wild.
I can tell you, like, I've definitely ripped that CD as MP3 files to multiple computers over the last 20 years, and it's definitely never copied it in that way.
Wild.
I think unless you have that CD, you're never going to hear that track. Maybe I'll try to like get a digital copy from my CD and then I'll send it to you. You can put it in the episode.
Sure. Or it's probably on YouTube.
Oh yeah, God,
That's where I get a lot of stuff.
it'd be cool if it wasn't. I'd actually.
I know.
It
It kind of ruins the mystery, doesn't it?
Yeah, like I remember when it became popular enough to where everyone knew where it was, like how to find it.
Mhm.
But I still don't know anyone that can tell me how to do it. But going back to the original question, Losing Streak, it's track 4 that
Oh.
starts Something's Out There and It Takes Me Away. It might be just called Something's Out There.
It's Sugar in Your Gas Tank.
Oh, what's number 5?
Shindo. Might be Shindo.
Yeah, see, this is the problem with a lot
Could
of
be
bands.
one of those songs that doesn't have the actual title in the lyrics.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like this,
Yes.
this is very typical of a lot of bands where it's just like,
Mhm.
this song's called Blu-ray Flowers, and you're like, what? But it never says that, and it has nothing
Yep.
to do with any of those words. Yeah, no,
Uh-oh. What's a line in that song?
it starts like that. Something's out there, and it takes me away to a world too small to stay. Something's out there.
And It Takes Me Away.
Yeah, I mean, I can literally tell you, I was just listening to this album. I can pull it up right
Hold on. My Google powers are working. It's Shindo.
now. It is Shindo. Okay. Yeah, I was
Yes.
like, was it? Oh, does it? Because it goes. My memory. This is like so many albums, right? That we listened to at this time is my memory of it is the album. It's not like, an
Which is
MP3.
nice because that's the way we
What's
used to do things. We used to listen to it as an entire unit.
Yeah.
And like it wasn't a single based world back then. So that
Bastard.
makes sense. Yeah.
Well, you got to ruin this for me.
Mhm.
And then finally, Borders and Boundaries. Oh, this is an album. So the first song that was introduced to me was Look What Happened. My
Mhm.
same friend, if you go back and listen to the Brand Van 3000 episode, my same friend that introduced me to Brand Van got this album before I did and introduced me to this album with that one song. And that's track 4. And Look What Happened. I was like, this does not sound like their like typical stuff, but I love it. I was getting
Mhm.
big into like songwriting myself, and so like this whole album, in my opinion, was on another level. Lyrically, musically, production wise, I think they hit the nail on the head. And I know commercially, like with singles and stuff, I don't think it did as good as like Hello Rock View before it, or even the next album I think had a lot more like singles and radio play and like music videos with Rory Gilmore in them and shit. But Borders and Boundaries, I don't think had that. So I want to say that song, but I'm going to have to say, Is This Thing On instead, which is track 10 on that CD.
Mhm.
That's another one that just, there's something, both singers have a very unique sound to them, Krista Makes and Roger Lima.
Mhm.
And when I'm singing along, I can sing the Chris parts. I cannot sing the Roger parts. And anybody that listens, and I'm sure knowing your format, they've already heard a few songs. You can pick those out because he's saying like it's up in the nose, it's higher.
Is it always the higher harmony?
Yeah. And And there, I mean, there's songs where like Roger is just the singer, and there's songs where Chris is just the singer. But typically it's like Chris will do the verse and then both of them will do the chorus. And those two voices complement each other in a way that I can't think of many other bands that have that same perfection of vocal harmony, especially in the punk and ska world. But
Like I said, I listened to a few of the tracks off of my Spotify account, and it was like one of the things that attracted me to the songs was their harmonies.
Yeah.
Because I'm a big harmony fan. Like,
yeah,
that always gets me. So, yeah, I see what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's their vocal stylings are fantastic. And specifically Chris on those two songs, on Borders and Boundaries, Look What Happened, and Is This Thing On, has some portions that are just him and the guitar, and it's great. It sounds really good. Again, I think because I don't know, that's the album they pulled from Capitol and went with Fat Records, but it is, in my opinion, like the best produced album of all of their records. So.
Has there been anything new released in their albums in the last 10 years?
Oh yeah, lots.
I see lots of EP releases and See the Light.
Yeah, they got into that was in the same interview I read, I think. They're talking about how they got into like releasing EPs, like that was more their speed. And I'll tell you what, I'll take that over the like single culture we're getting into.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting very frustrated with musicians being like, here's one song, 2 months later, here's one song, 2 months later, here's one song, 5 months later, here's an album. Those 3 songs you already know, they're on the album. And you're like, well,
oh, I know, it's such a cheap way out of making
come on.
music. Well, the only positive I think in that kind of culture is that it's nice to constantly have something new. And I think that maybe there's more focus and appreciation on the one song. And so, for instance, like sometimes on an album, a song that band might really love might get completely ignored because of all the other songs. So at least there's that. But other than that, I totally am all about the full album experience.
Yeah. I just get I like to, if it's something I like to really almost play it out, like listen to it constantly. And when you get, and plus the full album, like you're talking about, and that's another thing with Borders and Boundaries that's so perfect, is each track goes into the next one. Same thing. We talked about that with Brain Van. Like there's certain bands that when they mix the albums, they do it where like that fade out of guitar from track 3 is the intro to the guitar in track 4, and it's perfect.
Yeah.
You don't get that when it's like a collection of singles that have been released over the last year that have just been put into an album because we have like 4 more songs now. So that's one thing that I think we're missing as a whole when it comes to albums versus whatever this modern way of releasing music is.
I'm glad you called that out, because that's something actually I never really, until you mentioned it, it's like, oh yeah, that is irritating.
Yeah. Albums were, God, I sound like such a fucking old man. But albums were albums, man.
Yes. Hey, so everybody listening to this is probably in some kind of agreement with that.
Hope so. And I will say, on the note of albums and EPs and stuff that they've done, they're constantly doing side projects. Bruce Lee Band was a side project. But they did some stuff that I found super entertaining back in the day, and like they maintain, it speaks to the level of like fun that they maintain as a band and that they've always kind of had. Like no matter how big they got, when their singles were like they did really well at one point, especially with Hello Rockview. Like they were getting a lot of radio play. Everyone knew who Less Than Jake was, that was like into kind of alternative music. And but they always had like a little tongue-in-cheek kind of thing, and that shows with on Losers Kings and Things We Don't Understand, and I think on Pezcore they cover some TV themes like Laverne and Shirley. There's a cover of Jenny 8675309. Fun songs like that. And then they released an album. I don't know what spurred this. I would love to be in the room where this conversation happened, but they released an album called Greased. and it was them covering all of the songs from Grease.
Oh no.
It's
No.
fantastic.
It's the karaoke host in me that's crying right now
Yeah.
because I'm so tired of Grease songs. Oh man.
Well, and then just to weave this in with more stuff that I'm obsessed with, on the Scream 2 soundtrack, they do a cover of, I think it was the Monkees originally, the I Think I Love You, So What Am I So Afraid Of? They do a cover of that. That's phenomenal. Because they do them well. Like, as much
Yeah.
as they're hilarious to sing like Summer Lovin', they do it really, it's really well done.
Hmm.
But it just shows like they're just having fun.
Good.
And that they're like so in sync as musicians, because like circling back to the beginning, like the horn parts and stuff, that's hard to do, man. And to just be like, let's cover these 8 Grease songs and throw it out on EP. I had that on CD. It had a cartoon picture of Chris and Roger like dancing like they're doing on Grease with like caricature size heads, and I think one of them was wearing a dress in the picture and one was wearing a leather jacket, like Danny and Sandra D.
Clever.
Oh, that's a great album. I don't even know if you can get that like on iTunes or anything. Believe me, I'm looking as we speak, but yeah, it's there's so much fun. And I'm looking at my little
I gotta say, what caught my attention in 2000, they opened for my favorite band, Bon Jovi. Now I thought, wow, that's interesting, because I wouldn't have seen that coming as a pairing.
Yeah, I was very confused. I saw that as well, because I was looking at all the bands they toured with, because they've literally, I think, in the like punk and ska world, they've toured with everybody. I think literally everybody. When I saw Bon Jovi, I didn't know what to make of that. And I was like, should I fact check that? Because that doesn't make any sense to me.
This is Wikipedia. It's not exactly
I
reliable,
believe it.
but
It like fits with the time of like, we have enough radio play to where we're going to open for this big act. But in what world does someone hear Less Than Jake and go, oh, this is the opening act for Bon Jovi? Who made that call?
No idea.
And then I question, like, what do you do with that as the band? Because is like, I guess you just say yes because it's Bon Jovi, and like
Maybe they're
that's
just like,
the
oh, let's just
opportunity.
do it and see what happens.
But
right?
so strange, yeah.
If it's offered to you, why wouldn't you take it? Unless you were like, oh no, I hate Bon Jovi.
Ugh, Bon Jovi. I am happy to report, as far as I can tell, there is no way to listen to the Greased album where they covered all the songs from Grease.
That keeps it special.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll find it on YouTube.
Or you could get it as an import, or you could get it as like maybe at a flea market or someplace like that, and just be really lucky to find it.
Yeah, I wonder if it was an import. Maybe it's from the Great White North up there by you.
Yeah, who knows? If I see it, I'll get it for you.
I'm sure I still have it in my large binder of CDs.
You can have 2. We'll see. Anyways, to wrap things up, what would you like to conclude to say? Like, we want to make sure we cover everything on that awesome web, the brainstorming web.
We hit everything on the web.
Okay.
I'm very excited to announce, but I will say, except for one thing. I mean, this is minor, but just another band that's associated with Less Than Jake is Alkaline Trio, whose lead singer would go on to be in Blink-182 while Tom was gone. Because they were signed by HMV Records, who was run by Mike Park, who was from Bruce Lee Band. But I mean, I to close, I would just say, go see them. They're finishing a European tour, and then they're continuing on playing a North American tour as per usual, and they still put on an amazing show. And it's a lot of people our age, so just don't worry about it. You'll have fun and you'll fit in, and it'll be fine.
Good. And I want you to just tell everybody too about where they can hear your podcast. Brief, like, what's it about? Because did I ever get a podcast trailer from you? Did we exchange trailers?
I think I sent one to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to play your trailer on like in a regular rotation because I have a few that I always play here and there.
Yeah, my
Strange
podcast is Friend Request. You can find it anywhere searching Friend Request. And I do interviews of friends and followers and people on social media that you would otherwise only interact with in the comment feeds. So I can get to know people better, birth to now, and kind of go over the different stories that we have as human beings and help create a more meaningful conversation with people.
Yeah, it's
You
a
can find that
fantastic
anywhere.
concept.
Thanks. You can follow the podcast at Friend Request Pod on all socials. And
Good.
that's-
Good.
fun.
Yeah. If you got a trailer, I'd love to exchange it with you. It'd be
Absolutely.
good. But I'm happy that you took the time, and thank you for really like taking the lead on this one too. Like I
Everything.
learn stuff, and I like that too, as much as I like talking about stuff.
I'm telling you, if you have an hour and a half to spare,
Mhm.
that documentary, pick it up, is phenomenal and really like dives into what ska was and how it came to be, and it's great.
Well, thank you so much.
Highly recommend. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to continue to listen to that when when we hang up here.
Social media, yeah, we've got it. Send us an email, dopenostalgiapodcast@gmail.com. Twitter, nostalgia dope. Or on Insta, dope_nostalgia.
This podcast is licensed by SOCAN because we believe that artists should be paid for their work.